I don't want to go. Hello and welcome back to the Doctor Who Marathon. I'm your host McEdam, and today we're going to be talking about the finale to the 10th Doctor's era, the Christmas and New Year's special, The End of Time. Written by Russell T Davies and is directed by Euro Lynn. This is it, the conclusion to the 10th Doctor's era. In 2009, there wasn't actually a full-on season. Instead, we had these specials, which I've talked about before on the marathon. We had, technically, the next Doctor's a part of the specials. I don't know why they included it like that, but it does count as one of the specials. Then you have Planet of the Dead, then you have Waters of Mars, and then you have End of Time Part 1 and Part 2. For you see, they did something a bit special, as usually we do get a Christmas special, as you normally do, and Part 1 was the Christmas special. However, it ended on a cliffhanger, which actually led into Doctor Who's first New Year's special, something which would become a recurring thing during the Chris Chibnall and Jodie Whittaker era, the New Year's special. So this is the first New Year's special, which is pretty cool. So yeah, this is a very, very popular story. It's the last story to not only feature the 10th Doctor, played by David Tennant, as the current Doctor, but it's also the last story produced by Russell T Davies and Judy Gardner as showrunners, as a completely new creative team would take up the mantle in the next year, or in the same year, depending on your point of view, because the last episode aired on the 1st of January 2010, so technically David Tennant got one story in 2010. One story. So yeah, this has there's just so much in it. I mean, this is 2 full-length episodes comprising of one story. It also means that this is actually the second longest regeneration story of all time if you go by runtime. In terms of episode counts, I mean, it's only 2, while some episodes are mostly 4. But this is the second longest in terms of runtime, only being beaten by the War Games, the second Doctor's regeneration story. So that is some pretty, a lot of stuff to do. It's also probably one of the most expensive Doctor Who stories out there, as under stories like Stolen Earth and Journey's End. So a lot, and basically everyone was eyeing on this story. David Tennant was such a popular, he was a British icon at this time. Doctor Who had never, well, it has, but it hasn't been this popular since the Tom Baker era back in the mid-70s. And everyone was watching Doctor Who. I remember going to school and just talking to my mates about their favourite recent episodes, and it seems like people's favourites were changing as new episodes were coming out. But this was it. This is the final story in the Russell T Davies era. Now, here's a fun fact. David Tennant wasn't actually going to leave. Russell T Davies announced he was going to leave first, or at least I think he did to the production team. And then when Stephen Moffat was going to take over, David Tennant was going to stay. However, when he decided he wanted to leave, the BBC actually considered just ending it there. That is not even a joke. They decided, they were thinking that David Tennant was such a big icon to the series that the series might not be as popular without him. So they were just going to cancel Stephen Moffat's era if David Tennant wasn't going to return. Obviously, that didn't happen by the end of the day. We did get a new incarnation in the form of Matt Smith. But it just goes to show how big a shoes David Tennant had. And a lot of eyes were on this show, and everybody, like, the show had such high standards at this point. I mean, you had, in the last series, some of the best episodes in the series, like Midnight, The Forest of the Dead, and Fires of Pompeii, as well as the magnificent epic that is Stolen Earth and Journey's End. Will this story top it off? Will this story live up to the hype? Depends on you ask. This story seems to be split down to middle, and that does seem to be it's not like a straight line. You know, there are people who love David Tennant's era the most and didn't like it, and there's other people who are on the opposite boat. However, there is a blurry line where it depends on, are you a fan of the 10th or the 11th Doctor? Because the story mainly deals with the Doctor dealing with his death, which is a first for the series, surprisingly. With most, if not all, regeneration stories, the regeneration is mainly left up to the end, where it's where the Doctor dies and he regenerates. The only exception to this, fittingly enough, with David Tennant being one of the popular Doctors, is Tom Baker, the popular Doctor, who had his regeneration story have the element of the story be about his regeneration, being about him knowing he's going to regenerate. However, if you rewatch that story, it's kind of confusing. But there you go. Now, I just want to state this first. If you are somebody who likes this story, and more specifically someone who likes the 10th Doctor's, the way they handled the 10th Doctor's regeneration, that is completely fine. In fact, I can understand this story plays into what Russell T Davies loves to do, and that is playing with the emotional strings. Characters are crying, people are breaking down, there's a lot of emotional beats, a lot of emotional moments, and there's a lot of scenes which just seem solely to tell the audience, right, this is where you're gonna cry. Personally, for me, in terms of this story alone, I feel like David Tennant deserved better. David Tennant was such a big incarnation, and he needed this swashbuckling epic adventure, and this story does deliver on that to some regard. But I feel like everybody's given it top form. Eurolin's directing. My God, this story looks gorgeous. Murray Gold's music has never sounded greater. David Tennant, though I feel like in certain scenes he does play it over the top in terms of giving out the emotions, I do feel like he is a fantastic performance and he is giving his heart out. Bernard Crimmins easily steals the show, however. Bernard Crimmins in this there are certain scenes where I've just bolted down crying every time without fail, and it's his performance that mainly sells it. But I feel like the weak link here is Russell T Davies' script. Now, if you stick with Russell T Davies, you know that he likes particular characters, and he's not very good at giving up characters. A great example is the character of Rose, Russell T Davies' first companion in the revived series. He absolutely loved the character, and the first two series is, in terms of her, is mainly about how much the Doctor just appreciates and cares for her, whilst, in my opinion, she doesn't really do much to justify it, but that's a completely different story. But the point I'm trying to make is that Russell T Davies really knows that he really likes certain characters, to the point where when Rose left, they made it out as if like it's the leaving of the best companion ever. And when stories afterhand, like with stories with Martha and Donna, were mainly focused on David Tennant being upset the 10th Doctor was being upset that Rose had left. In fact, that was one of my only real criticisms I had with Series 3, is that the 10th Doctor's, Russell T Davies doesn't really know how to give up on a character. And I feel like that shows here. But to start off the story, we have the Doctor basically arriving on... Well, actually, there's a pre-credit sequence in which we have Timothy Dalton playing this narrator character as people are starting to have bad dreams, but they seem to forget about them earlier on. Really clunky setup right there. You set up that everybody has bad dreams, but then forgets about them. So what's the point? With only the exception of Wilfred, who goes to this church. He seems to be drawn here, and when he gets into the church, he notices on the stained glass of the TARDIS, whilst this woman, this mysterious woman who's played by, I believe her name is Claire Bloom, who also worked with Charlie Chaplin, fun fact, basically says that, the Doctor might be coming, and Wilfred starts seeing images of the Master in his head. And then when we go back into the after the credits, we get cut to the planet of the Ood. Now here is something which in certain ways, actually, this marathon doing these with these stories in between has really helped. And I highly recommend, if you're going to watch Waters of Mars and then End of Time back to back, that you read some Time Lord Victorious stuff, or maybe even the Out of Time Big Finish audio drama, which features, of course, the Fourth Doctor as well. I highly recommend you try those, because if you go by just the TV, man, is it disappointing. You go from the Waters of Mars, which has the 10th Doctor, basically becoming this really brooding character who has made this vow, this not a vow, but he is getting into a darker mindset, with the story basically ending, and that story ending him saying, no, I'm not going to go to my death. I am going to fight this, and I am going to stop death wherever I can, even if that means breaking the timeline. We start off this story with the 10th Doctor arriving in this really happy-go-lucky attitude. And that is a natural thing for the 10th Doctor to do. He does have a lot of happy-go-lucky moments. A great example is in Girl in the Fireplace, where he comes in drunk in one scene. But here, right after Waters of Mars, it's unbearable. And there's also some really cringy, I hate that word cringy, but it's a really cringy comedy where the Doctor uses his sonic screwdriver like car keys, and he locks the TARDIS doors, and the TARDIS even makes a car locking noise. That might got a chuckle from a few people. If you enjoyed that, go for it. But personally, I was just had my hand in my hand like that. And the Doctor basically says, like, oh yeah, you telling me my death was near. I'm not in no rush for that. And then we also get mentions of him marrying Queen Bess, Queen Elizabeth. So the events of Day of the Doctor, which were teased in the Shakespeare Code, they happened during this gap of Waters of Mars and the End of Time. But anyway, the Ood, basically, they're like, you shouldn't have delayed. Now, come on, we're in a rush. You need to proclaim your destiny. We've been having these bad dreams. We seemingly think the universe have been having this bad dream. But they seem to forget. Again, bit of clunky setup right there. But the Ood seem to remember, I think. There's also a little detail as well where the Doctor notices like the Ood civilization has expanded, making these really beautiful cities and stuff, and it's happened over the span of 100 years, which the Doctor thinks is way too soon. Something is happening to time which is altering things to the point where civilizations are moving much quicker, to the point where even the Ood have time-sensitive abilities and actually can send themselves back into the past, which they did at the end of Waters of Mars. And although that doesn't actually get resolved here, it does kind of get resolved in Series 5 with the Crack in Time storyline. So that, I don't know if that's a criticism. You can kind of say that something to do with the Time Lords or whatever, but that does get resolved in Series 5, if anyone's interested in that. And they basically revealed that the Master is coming back and something is returning. Something's coming back. And also, you're going to die when there's 4 knocks. They also show them these 2 characters that the Doctor is not familiar with, and seemingly they are playing into this planned destiny. This something is happening to reality, but destiny is a prophecy. It must be fulfilled, and the Doctor, knowing that the Master and that something to do with Wilfred Mott is happening, basically starts running to his TARDIS as we have some back of the ranch storytelling where we see Lucy Saxon from Last of the Time Lords. She basically gets rescued from her prison from a cult of Saxon worshippers, Harold Saxon worshippers that is, as they resurrect the Master, and John Sim reprises his role as the Master. Now, this is something which I've had strange feelings about. When I first watched this story in 2009, I loved the Master here. I love this weird, berserked energy he has in this story. He has this... he's basically gone completely insane as his resurrection. Something went wrong, and so he's become this very brutal, very insane character. More insane than he actually was prior. And I used to like that as a kid. I always liked it when villains can kind of overact in a sense. And John Sims, he can really pull this off. However, watching it now for this marathon, it is a kind of a drag on the narrative, because the Master is already insane with the idea of the drum and beats in his head, which is pushing him to do very unsampled things, like killing people and wanted to take over the world. It's the Master. You didn't need really a reason, but the Revived series gave him the reason of the drum beats in his head. But then they decide to give him this hunger, so he's constantly hungry, and this kind of, not really split personality, but his personality seems to be deformed in some way. He also has his skull appear in certain scenes as his body starts breaking down, a reference to his appearance in The Deadly Assassins, for those of you interested. So a nice little tribute to that Robert Holmes story. But anyway, what that means is that when characters are starting talking to the Master, we have constancy. It's either him talking about food or talking about the drum in his head, to the point where when characters trying to get information from him or try to have a discussion with him, we constantly have this this particular character story beat, which, like I said, kind of drag. Only on the first part. In the second part, the Master kind of goes back to how he was in Last of the Time Lords. I feel like it's much improved there. But for part 1, it it's also incredibly silly. There's a scene in which the Doctor basically tries to confront the Master, and he's trying to help him and stuff, but the Master's just constantly talking about food, and it's like, even though the Doctor's saying stuff, and it's I heard about this prophecy, the drumming of 4 times, but he's talking about I'm just so food, this world's full of fat, I don't want it all. And John Sims plays this mad incarnation of the Master extremely well. Nothing wrong with John Sim here. But it does mean that the story struggles, because we already had the drum beat in his head to show the Master's insanity, and now you have the hunger thing. It really underlines both their performances. But now let's get into what most people talk about, because we have a scene where the Doctor chases the Master. Though the chase scene is very energetic, there's a lot of great cuts and there's a lot of great, and the music in it is so catchy, and Murray Gold plays it well. I do feel like something went wrong in that action scene. There's something to do with the editing, maybe, as you don't really get a good idea of the geography of this quarry. But anyway, during that, Wilfred actually just so happens to stumble across the Doctor. When I say stumble, Wilfred, after being contacted by the woman, he basically gets his friends together to create I believe they call them the Silver Shroud, these grunge of pensioners who go around looking for the Doctor. Nettie from the Beautiful Chaos novel gets a mention. That is awesome, because Russell T Davies was a fan of Gary Russell's novel, and that is just beautiful. I really love that little moment. I wish we got to see her. I wish that Naughty Nettie character, the actress who played her, that's who I imagine Nettie to be. That is that. If I had my way, if I was doing that, I would have made her Nettie. But anyway. So the Doctor basically discusses with Wilfred what's been happening in a restaurant, which I would like to add was filmed in Swansea. Hey! That's really cool. In fact, I've been to that restaurant multiple times growing up. So to see the Doctor and Wilfred talk about something in a scene, in a place that I have been, like, regularly as a child, it's a very strange experience to watch. It is very weird, but this is where we basically get to the heart of the story, of this narrative, and here is where the fandom gets split, because this story deals with the 10th Doctor's regeneration. As I've stated, the Doctor knows from the beginning that he is going to face a really big challenge, which most likely will end in his death. And the Doctor states, I'm dying, I'm going to die, or at least I've been told in a prophecy, which, by the way, prophecies in Doctor Who don't really work. The Doctor as a character is always about, like, disproving and trying to find out the mysteries of some of the universe's greatest things. For him to be just so compliant in destiny and not making your own decisions, that, like, time has this map, feels very unlike the Doctor. But anyway, getting back on track. The Doctor basically deals this event as if he's going to die. And in some ways that really works. However, when Wilfred is like, yeah, but you can change your face, can you? This is where the controversy of this story, which splits the fandom down the middle, happens, in which the 10th Doctor basically explains that when he regenerates, it feels like dying. He dies, and a new person, the words he uses, a new person just goes wandering off. That is really dismissive of the next incarnation. Can you imagine if Tom Baker did that? If Tom Baker, like, in his last story was just like, oh, I don't want to change the next person. I don't want to be them. I don't want to be the next. I don't want to be blonde and small and tiny. I want to stay like this. And then he changed. Can you imagine how alienating that would be for Peter Davison? And that's what happens here. And that's what did happen here. As the fandom, like I said, was split down the middle. And personally, this, not really the battle between 10 and 11, but for me personally, this story really gives David Tennant an injustice. He deserved so much better. I've heard a lot of people really actually liking this element and saying that I'd say, well, I don't want to say justify it, because that makes it sound like like they're wrong, but they're not wrong. It's their opinions, but they feel like what makes this work is that in their eyes, the 10th Doctor is the Doctor's, his mind, his favourite incarnation. He doesn't want to give up his favourite incarnation, and that the Doctor has this very strong emotional attachment to this Doctor after the war-battened 9th Doctor regenerated into this young, new youth of life, which might dissipate in the next incarnation. If you have that opinion, if you like the story for that reason, I say, fair enough. I mean, though I don't agree with it, a lot of people do see it like that, and that is, it's a valid opinion. I think that's what the story is going for, what Russell T Davies intended. However, for me, what makes this, why it doesn't work for me is because the story isn't about that. The story deals with the 10th Doctor basically trying to come to terms with it, but he never does. You've got this massive battle with the Master and stuff. I'm not going to be talking about too much about plot here because there is just so much to talk about in terms of the larger debate of the end of time, and I do have a strong opinion on this. So to basically quickly brush in, the Master basically gets captured by these people, Joshua and Abigail Naismith, these billionaire father and son who have found this machine by Torchwood that can actually heal people from an entire planet, but it's broken, so they need the Master's help. After learning that he was this genius and that he was resurrected, they brought back Harold Saxon to basically fix the machine. Pretty bad idea, but you can kind of get this here. These characters, Joshua and Abigail, they are so annoying and strange. They're a father and daughter who have this really strange, let's be honest, uncomfortable relationship where the father's just like, I want to make this machine to make everybody immortals, but it's not for me, it's for my daughter. He's constantly like touching her face and he's constantly like around her. And Abigail acts really strange. I don't understand what was going on in that scene, what was happening behind the scenes. But anyway, the Master gets a hold of this machine and turns every single human being into the Master. Everybody transforms into the Master with the exception of the Doctor. These two alien characters who look like cactuses. They are like comic relief. There's nothing really much to talk about them two. Wilfred and Donna, who after seeing the Master, her head kind of explodes of this energy and knocks out a few Masters and seemingly just disappears throughout the story. Catherine Tate returns here in a very minor role. I am actually a fan of the idea that she comes back as a minor role and Wilfred becomes the popular character. Her time ended. Her era ended with the two-parter Stolen Earth and Journey's End. That means that I don't feel like, unless it's a big special occasion for her, she can go back to being like a minor character. Whereas Wilfred, Bernard Crimmins here, holy hell, every scene where he's in, my heart breaks. The fact that he knows that the Doctor's dying, this woman character keeps appearing on him, and we keep seeing her, and she basically tells Wilfred to get ready to battle, get the Doctor ready for battle. We can't tell him I'm here. And she kind of appears and disappears. And there's these two overarching storylines between the Doctor and Wilfred. One is being the characterization of the Doctor's death, and another one is basically the Doctor taking up arms. And some of that detail is actually very well handled. There's a great scene, a fantastic scene in part 2, where it's one of my favourite pieces of dialogue, where basically the Doctor reveals that he's older than Wilfred. And Wilfred is just like, 900 compared to us, 900 years compared to us, we must look like ants. And the Doctor just says quietly, I think you look like giants. That should have been David Tennant's final moment. Can you imagine that? That would be so brilliant. But anyway, so the Doctor, he basically learns that the drumming in the Master's head is linking him to the past, specifically a moment in the Time War, which gets mentioned, and this is revealed that Timothy Dalton's character, the narrator, isn't actually a narrator at all. He's actually playing Rassilon, the Lord President of Gallifrey during the early years of Gallifrey, who somehow is back and has become this this leader for the Time Lord Society once more. Now, Rassilon here also has a bit of controversy between the new series fans and the classic series fans. If you are familiar with Rassilon in any way, shape or form with the classic series, his characterization doesn't really add up well, as Rassilon in the past is, there is this mystery of him potentially being this really dark and dangerous foe. However, the mystery about him, like I said, is a mystery. It's this giant mystery of a Time Lord society, where the Rassilon was this innocent, godlike creature, or was he like an evil dictator? And that was kind of one of the great things about the myth of Rassilon. It was a myth, like a Greek god who has sometimes been known as this great healer, and sometimes to be known as a ruthless dictator who used berserker-like warriors in his wars. But here, he's flat out the villain. And Timothy Dalton gives this magnificent performance. However, it's not Rassilon in the sense, that it's linked with the classic series. I have a fan theory, a fan idea. I will say it's not linked with any sort of evidence other than what I actually personally want. But that's how I justify the characterization. So I will say it's not part of my criticism or even my opinion on this story. It's just where my head goes when watching a story. This isn't the original Rassilon, in my opinion. This is a character, either the descendant of Rassilon, a Rassilon Jr., if you will, or it's a character named after the original Rassilon, who fought during the Time War, and he's become this character who, because he's got the name of Rassilon, he's become this very hot-headed character who just will not die. He refuses to die. In fact, we kind of get this introduction scene where this woman is like, right, the Doctor has the moment, he's prepared to destroy Gallifrey and Time Lords alike, Time Lord, Gallifrey, Skaro and Daleks alike, which is the War Doctor. That's what happens in the Day of the Doctor. And the Rassilon basically kills us, like, thank you for your opinion. Brilliant line, by the way. And he just refuses to die. Something unlike Rassilon from the classic series. I mean, in the Five Doctors, we basically has that saying, he who wins shall lose and who shall lose shall win, or something like that, which basically reveals from Rassilon knows that immortality is also not only a blessing, but it's also a curse. And now we have a Rassilon who's just like, I don't want to die! Sorry, I don't know what that was all about. So yeah, that's how I'm justifying it. And I can understand why a lot of people have criticisms, classic Who fans have criticisms with this. However, the story didn't have to do that. There is a character who would fit the exact same role as Rassilon in this story, but would actually be continually justified with the classic series. Don't make him Rassilon, make him Omega. That makes so much more sense. And especially what this Rassilon has in mind of what he wants to do. Essentially, he knows that the Time War has become this complete corruption that it cannot technically end. It'll just keep going and just destroy everything, and not even the Time Lords can survive. There is no way in hell the Time Lords will survive. So what Rassilon plans is basically to destroy everything in time and space, and all the Time Lords will be essentially reincarnated in forms where they're just pure consciousness. And that sounds like something Omega would do, not Rassilon. But that's just, I'm just going to complete tangent now. But, make him Omega. If I was writing this, I would have made him Omega. But anyway, we had this really powerful scene in which the Doctor basically crashes down. A lot of people criticise that with considered it, like, there's a lot of moments in this story which are considered really silly and goofy, with this being the one of them with the 10th Doctor falling out of the window, with a lot of people pointing, hold on, the 4th Doctor fell on a much lower height and he regenerated from that, and now the 10th Doctor can fall from that height and survive? What? However, it doesn't really bother me. And you could use the argument that when the Doctor regenerated with the 4th incarnation, that kind of got his current bodies to get used to falling heights, so it didn't give him that much damage. That's how I justify it. Nothing in the Doctor Who canon that justifies that argument, but that's how I'm seeing it anyway. And so the Doctor has to make this decision where he has to basically kill someone to break the link and stop the Time Lords from returning. He either kills Rassilon or he kills the Master. And this is a really powerful scene. I love how you can just tell what the characters are thinking. You do have John Sims kind of narrating it. He's kind of like, when the Doctor's pointing at Rassilon, the Master's kind of just like, yes, do it! He could, you could rule Gallifrey if you had this. And then he turns the gun back at the Master, and it's just like, oh yes, if you kill me, you didn't have to kill, it breaks the link. And so, that will end it all. So go on, do it. Do it. Kind of egging him on, going that the Doctor would never kill one of his oldest friends. I forgot to mention the scene in which the Doctor and Wilfred sit down and just chat. And Wilfred basically tries to offer him the gun. And the Doctor's just like, I can't. I just can't. And Wilfred's just like, how dare you? Like, he asks him, he's like, if Master dies, what happens to every other human? The link gets broken and everyone gets turned back to normal. How dare you then put everyone else, how dare you put the Master before everyone else? That is a great moment and a great scene. And you kind of do see both points of view here. As the 10th Doctor is the last Time Lord, the last survivor of his race, and there's the Master, his oldest friend. But it's the human race. And it's only one person who is a very dark, evil character from Wilfred's point of view. And throughout the story, another criticism this story has had, which I actually will defend this story to my death, is that a lot of people criticise the Doctor's interaction with the Master in this story, because a lot of scenes the Doctor tries to bring the Master to the light side, shall we say. The Doctor is like, you don't have to do this. You can travel with me. It will be my honour. We could be so magnificent together. Please, just stop what you're doing, and I can help you. And I will not, harm you in any way. We'll put it under the bridge. We can still be friends. This is a complete departure to stories like The Deadly Assassin, which is a story, funny enough, references, where the Doctor basically explains the Master is pure evil. He must be destroyed. I actually defend this argument because the Doctor, at this point, he's gone through so much. He's from his point of view, the Time Lords are dead. He's gone through so much and so much pain, and he's lost so much friends, more than he did in The Deadly Assassins, that the Master is something that links him back to his childhood. And he just, he desperately wants a win here. He desperately needs a victory, and him to have a victory of something like helping the Master become a good guy again would be just that's something he really wants to hold into, and something which actually again ties into later stories featuring the Master's next incarnation, Missy. If you want to retroactively consider this part of that narrative, you could do, don't know. So there's that really lovely moment, and the Master at the end of the story actually kind of redeems himself as he tells the Doctor to step out the way, and he shoots Rassilon, throwing himself into the last day of the Time War, which also I would like to state, this story is a sequel, a prequel, and Day of the Doctor is a sequel, a prequel, and set concurrently with this story. That's pretty funny. Also, you're probably wondering who that woman was that Wilfred was talking to. She doesn't actually get an explanation here. She seemingly is a Time Lord, because the only time the Doctor sees her, she's in Time Lord robes, and seemingly he sees her. In behind the scenes interviews and in behind the scenes written books and stuff, Russell T Davies has stated outright that she is the Doctor's mother. I'm personally not a fan of this idea. I don't know. It just doesn't sit well with me. With a lot of people coming up with other theories, like she is Romana, the Doctor's former lover, former companion. But there has been hints that they were an item at one point, and also Susan, which is one of my favourite fan theories. However, if you've seen my vlog or my fan edited film No More, I've retroactively put it that she is the sentient consciousness of the moment. She seems to have similar abilities. Teleportation, has only certain characters can see her at certain moments, whereas other characters seem to be she's completely invisible to. And she seems to have future events bestowed upon her, so she can see the future and have a taste of different timelines in the future. So I'm putting it as the moment. There's nothing again stated anywhere, but unlike my other fan theories in this video, there is kind of a justification for it. She has similar abilities. She plays a very similar role in the story, and it does kind of make sense that the War Doctor who saw Rose in Day of the Doctor wouldn't see Rose in the original timeline in which he destroyed Gallifrey. So he must have seen someone different. So it must have been the woman, in my eyes. But the Doctor, he thinks he survived. He thinks he's won. He's defeated all. We get this great moment where he's lying on the floor and he's smiling to himself. He's just giggling with nervous energy as he's like, I did it. I lived. I survived. I didn't have to change. I didn't have to die. It didn't happen. And then you hear as Wilfred got into this box to basically help. They established this box which is a conductor for some sort of radiation activity that only one person has to be in it at the same time, and you can only lock the door from the other end. It's a bit silly, I know, but I do feel like the story does justify it. And so the Doctor realises the Fornox isn't the Master, it was Wilfred, who is gotten into this chamber that is basically going into overload. If the Doctor sets him free, goes into the cabinet and presses the button, then it'll flood with radiation, killing the Doctor. And the Doctor just has this breakdown, this absolute breakdown. It's a great performance. David Tennant just giving it his all, breaking down. But I do feel like, again, it does feel like the 10th Doctor's going, no, I don't want to change. And I feel like David Tennant plays this scene a bit too much. Like, it not only does it pull the emotional strings, it kind of drags you, in a sense, in a way that you really, really just have this. I mean, in a way, it's a great scene and a great performance because it really doesn't want you to see the 10th Doctor change. It really wants you to. It really makes you emotionally attached to the 10th Doctor. But I feel like it's in a way which is actually harmful to not only the story but to the franchise as a whole. As, again, it's basically saying the 10th Doctor's basically saying the next person is not me. It's not the Doctor. I'm the Doctor kind of attitude. But, and he says, it's not fair. It's not right that I have to risk my life for someone. Why can't I just, travel as I am now? Why do I have to change or die in this particular sense? Now compare this story to two other stories where the Doctor has sacrificed himself for a companion, with Caves of Androzani, with the 5th Doctor, and the Partner of the Waves and Bad Wolf with the 9th Doctor. Both of those absolutely amazing. And what makes those stories work is that the Doctor basically asks for nothing. He does nothing just to save one person. With the 5th Doctor giving up the poisonous antidote to Perry and lets himself die. And he's kind of like okay with that. He knows that, it was for a greater purpose. It was to save someone, to save a life. With Partner of the Waves, the Doctor basically gave himself up and he gave Rose a smile. It's like, don't worry, you were fantastic. And you know what? So was I. Now compare that to this story where the Doctor's just like, well, look at you're not the least bit of important. But what about me? I can do so much more. Like, it does pull on the emotional strings. It is so emotionally gripping. But I feel like it does harm the character of the Doctor. And history, when Matt Smith was first series came out and how split to the fandom it was, just goes to show what this story had done to the series. And so at the end he does kind of calm down and he says it will be my honour, which I do like. Again, I feel like David Tennant played the I don't want to go moment on that scene a bit too much. I feel like the whole Wilfred, it would be my honour, he should have played that more into the scene. And so he opens the door, Wilfred goes out and he starts feeling pain. And there's this moment where he has his hand over his head, and you look and you think, has he changed? And then you think, like, he puts his hand over, he looks around, he's going to be Matt Smith. But that isn't actually happens. He stays the 10th Doctor. And we get this another scene, which, again, is another controversial moment. And I'm against it, personally, where the 10th Doctor, again, it's another thing where it's emotionally dragged, it's emotionally gripping, and I can understand if you're interested in this era, why you would love this scene, these scenes, I should say, but for me, it doesn't really work. And again, I love the 10th Doctor. I love David Tennant's performance. I just feel like this story really just gives him an injustice, as he covers his face and all those wounds are healed, and he basically reveals like it started, and he says he drops Wilfred back to Donna's house, and he goes, I catch my reward. And we get this montage of him basically interacting with other characters, like we see Martha and Mickey, fuck you Noel Clark, Jack. We see Luke and Sarah Jane in Sarah Jane's last appearance in the main Doctor Who series, which is just, oh man. Okay, I will admit that bit was, I love that bit. And so, yeah, and it does bring up the question, if the Doctor was okay for the moment, why did he make a big fuss of it? Like, what's stopping? I mean, obviously he's been poisoned and he's slowly dying, but he's so slowly that he could have a few adventures saving his friends along the way. This is actually worse retroactively in canon, where the 11th Doctor basically explains that when he was dying last, he went to see all of his companions from the very beginning, from everybody he has known. So he had at least like years before a point, like he could have found a cure or something. Maybe that is kind of me overthinking it. But it also gives this the idea that the Doctor is dying, this is the end of the 10th Doctor, but in a way which is a bit over bombastic and makes me feel anyway, that it's way too much it's trying too hard to pull the emotional strings. You already had that scene with the Doctor and Wilfred. You didn't need to have this montage where the Doctor sees all of his previous companions and then meets Rose Tyler before the events of Rose. I felt that was kind of unfair and unjustified. But anyway, it's time for the Doctor to leave as he gets into his TARDIS and he states his final words. I don't want to go. The Doctor in this story is dealing with the fact that he is going to die, if at least regenerate into another form. He has not learned the moral lesson that, change is inevitable. It's Doctor Who. It's all about change. It's all about, it's sad when it ends, but a new beginning always arrives. Something new is going to come in, birth from this. This is the passing of a torch moment. And with nobody there, no companions to witness this and to help the audience to grow with his character. Something which I believe has only happened twice. Technically not, because in the TV movie, you kind of had Grace at the start with the 7th Doctor. So technically the only time the Doctor has regenerated without a companion is the story, The War Games, which is funny, isn't it? Two of the longest stories, both ending with the Doctor with no companions. But in the next story, in the 3rd Doctor's first story, you had the Brigadier and Unit, which were part of the 2nd Doctor era, which helps with that change. But here you don't have that. And to have the 10th Doctor say, I don't want to go, he's basically telling the audience, hey, this new guy, he's not going to be great as me. I don't want to go. Why do I have to become like him? Do you see the issue there? Now, if you liked the last line, if you were crying, I cried when I first watched this. I didn't like it even back in 2009, 2010, but it did make me cry because of the emotional hook. I was a 10th Doctor fan. I'm a fan of all the Doctors, but the 10th Doctor was such an important part as he was one of the longer Doctors that I grew up with. He was one of the first TV Doctors I watched during his era, with Series 3 and Series 4 being just outright fantastic pieces of television. And to see the 10th Doctor and David Tennant leave on such a low note, in my personal opinion, it's really disheartening. And I feel like this story really suffers from it. But anyway, the Doctor regenerates, and this is like another thing as well, because now that the story ends with the 10th Doctor not wanting to go and still having not solved this emotional hook, what are you supposed to do as a writer? Because at the end of the story, the last bit with the 11th Doctor, was written by Stephen Moffat. What the hell was he supposed to do? He had two options. Neither of them were good, but he had to pick one. Either A, he brings up the fact that the 10th Doctor had this emotional baggage, and that it's the 11th Doctor that basically has to learn that change is good. Right off the back is a terrible start for a new Doctor to start off with, carrying on in the emotional hooks of a previous Doctor like that, in that capacity. Not saying that an emotional hook carried on by doctors isn't a bad thing, but this specific one seems really bad. Or you just completely ignore it. Again, alienating fans of the 10th Doctor and just hoping that the new fans or people will just forget and hope that the next stories, the next series will drag them in. So either way, the new era had this unfair disadvantage going into the series, which is a real shame. Luckily, people have mellowed over time. A lot of people like both 10 and 11, and that is awesome. They both deserve to have huge appreciations, but I just want to state that when this story came out, when Series 5 came out, when Matt Smith was starting, there was this divide, this hatred for the new era. And people who just started with this new era hated this other era because they seemed to be hating their era for some reason. And I feel like that unnecessary contrast is due to the fact how the 10th Doctor was handled here. Luckily that mellowed out over time, and it's a debate which is thankfully dissipated. I mean, people still like one or the other, but it's not like a heated debate. Sorry, I went on a complete tangent there. And so that's the end of Time. Overall, it is a mixed bag. Eurolin's directing is phenomenal. There's some amazing bits. Bernard Crimmins, Russell T Davies, and David Tennant have a lot of great little moments. Some moments I could just, out from the top of my head, just make me cry. John Sims, though I feel like he was actually pretty weak in part 1. Part 2 he got really good and a lot more interesting. But it's the dealing with the Doctor's characterization in this which really lets the story down. And really makes the story a real drag on the not only the narrative, but the franchise as a whole. And in my opinion, it's actually the weakest regeneration story. Actually, I tell a lie. It's the second weakest regeneration story after Twice Upon a Time beats it. So, you have that End of Time. At least you're not Twice Upon a Time. I don't know if that's a... So yeah, I'm not a fan of this story. If you're a fan of this story, I just want to make it absolutely clear. If you're a fan of this story, if you enjoy the story, and specifically you like it because of the emotional hook of David Tennant and his storyline in this, that's fine. That is awesome. I can see to an extent where you're coming from. But for me, David Tennant deserved a lot better. So anyway, that's the End of Time. So join me next time where we join a fairy tale as people start seeing creatures from the corner of the eye and we get introduced to Amelia Pond, Rory Williams and the new Doctor. So join me next time for the 11th hour and I'll see you next time on the Doctor Who Marathon. Ta-ra.